Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to Intermediate Music Theory video number 11. In this video, we're going to talk about diminished chords. We're going to talk about the fully diminished chord versus the half diminished chord. Well, what is the difference and where do they occur? That's what we're going to talk about. First of all, you have to extend the chord out to the 7. You got to have 1, 3, 5, 7 in this chord. They're half diminished and fully diminished only comes into play when it's extended to the 7th. So you should know right now, you're like, oh, okay, there must be something different about the 7ths and the two chords. If you're thinking that, you're absolutely right. A half diminished chord has a minor 7th. A fully diminished chord has a flat 7. Flat 7 in this context means you take the minor 7 and you flat it another half step, which is actually enharmonically a major 6th. They're the same thing. A major 6 and a flat 7 are the same distance. Let's say distance from the root. They're not the same note. They would be like taking, so in, let's look at a G. G with the minor 7. That minor 7 is an F. Well, flat 7 would be F flat. Okay, very important. But a major 6th would be an E. Okay, that's the difference. Same note, F flat, E are the same note. Just notation wise, you'd have to talk about them differently in this context because we're talking about the diminished chord, fully diminished chord. Okay. Step 2, where do they occur naturally? A half diminished chord occurs naturally in a major key. So if you take G major and you build that chord up to the 7th off the 7, you get a half diminished chord. Because 1 to the 3 is a minor 3rd, 3 to the 5 is a minor 3rd, but 5 to 7 in this context is a major 3rd, which gives you a minor 7th. Half diminished chord. Now, fully diminished chord. Take G harmonic minor and off that raised 7th, build a chord, and your 1, 3, 5, 7, between each of those, a minor 3rd, and you get a fully diminished chord. Now, in this case, with my root position ones that I'm using, you can see there's very little different. Again, all you're doing is flatting the 7th from a half diminished chord. Okay, next cool thing about this fully diminished chord, or the next important thing to know, is this succession of stacked minor 3rds. If you were to go up to, say, the 9th of the chord, it's enharmonic to the root of the chord. In this context, or in our, say, go back to our context of G, where that flat 3 is an E. So in the case of G, the 9th should be some flavor of A, right? Well, from E up to here, that's enharmonic to G. So it's actually like A double flat. And that's your next. That would be the 9th. So if you were to write it out, it would look funny. It would look like you had a new note on this chord, but you don't. You just have an enharmonic A double flat or G all over again. This is important and cool for two reasons. It's important because the nature of this chord means that it's cyclical, that as you extend out, you hit the octave and you just keep going and it's all the same notes. Which means that every note of this fully diminished chord is technically a root. You can flip this chord any direction, it's going to sound the same way. That means that off any note of a fully diminished chord, you can resolve up a half step off that note to a minor chord, and you resolved it correctly, and it's going to sound cool, but you can take different turns with this one chord. You can go to 4 new chords versus the half diminished chord. You can kind of just go to that one chord or maybe a couple of common tone chords. Now, if we go into common tone chords, off the fully diminished chord, you can go to like 8 different chords and still sound okay. Maybe 12. I mean, it really extends out. It's pretty cool. So let's take a look at that off the fully diminished chord. you can go up a half step from any of those notes to a minor chord. So that means you got that one's on the table because we can see that our lowest note goes to there. Now our next note, that flat 7, if you go down an octave, up a half a step, that gives you a new root for your next chord. So you could go there. It's pretty cool. Now your next note, that note, you go down an octave, up a half a step. And now you know, like, oh, I can go here. And that's pretty cool. Now our final note, we're going to go down an octave in a different way. We're going to do that C major shape. So imagine you're just playing a C major in the middle of nowhere. Off of that note, where your ring finger lands is the octave down from that note. And then slide up a half step, that's where your next root's gonna be, okay? So from here, and that's a perfectly acceptable resolution. You can continue on from there however you want. Or you could just make a chord progression that surrounds nothing but this fully diminished chord off those chords we just discovered. So you've got that resolution, this resolution, that resolution, hit the wrong note, but played the right chord. Just inverted it, that's all. Back to the fully diminished chord. So it's a cool thing about it. One last thing about the fully diminished chord is because of the nature of that, when you go up one more octave or one more minor third, you end up at the octave. That means that there are only 3 truly unique sounding fully diminished chords. Because once you get there, we know now they're just going to start over. I mean, they're going to have different notation, different note names, but they're going to sound identical to another one. For example, in this case, the G fully diminished chord, fully diminished, would sound identical to the B flat fully diminished chord. Or wouldn't sound identical because you're up a little bit, your ear's going to tell you something's a little different. But those notes are all going to be enharmonic to the G one. And so you start running out of room to escape to new ones, and then you run into a whole bunch of them that are enharmonic to each other, and only 3 that are truly unique from each other, which is a really cool thing. It's kind of like a solar eclipse of music, you know, if it's kind of nerdy, but I think it's kind of a cool, like, there's 3 and then you're done, and then they're all technically the same. So anyhow, that's what I wanted to cover. I want to know, did I forget anything? Just point out that fully diminished chord occurs naturally in harmonic minor, so I tend to resolve them up a half step to a minor chord. The half diminished chord occurs naturally as either the 2 chord in a regular minor scale or the 7 chord, of course, in all major keys. So I tend to resolve it up to a major chord. That's the only big difference. But as I always say, it's music. You express it how you want. So if you want to resolve a half diminished chord up to a minor chord, do it. If you want to resolve a fully diminished chord up to a major chord, do it. If your ear tells you that you enjoy that, then that's what you do. So that's the whole point of music is, does your ear tell you like it? Then you keep doing that. Anyhow, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Half diminished and fully diminished chords. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for being patient and listening to me ramble and for watching this video. You're going to do awesome.